Madam Commissioner, welcome in Bulgaria. You've been the first EU Commissioner on Equality since the end of 2019, and I'm curious to know, how do you feel about your journey so far?
Well, as you rightly say, it's the first time ever that the European Union has a Commissioner for Equality. And we have, in these 4.5 years, done work whereby we are working towards a union of equality by our strategies, by our legislation, and therefore to have a commissioner focused on equality has been very, very important in order for us to be able to work on these things and to follow every member state with how they are progressing on the area of equality. But not only that, we also have a task force for equality which sees every legislation and every policy, whether it's environment, whether it's the economy, whether it is agriculture, whatever, that they look at it from the equality perspective so that we can have this perspective which is in the policy or in the legislation from the very, very beginning. Okay, so it's not like you develop a policy and then you say, oh, this is going to be damaging for instance, persons with disabilities or for women or for LGBTIQ people. So you look at it from the very beginning, and I think that was the very big change that happened in the Commission, in the sense that we are looking with this equality lens at each and every policy and legislation.
And which, in your opinion, are the greatest achievements your office has managed to accomplish so far? Because we've seen the last pandemic years hitting with many inequalities, various racial minorities, disabled people, women, and equality, on the other hand, is one of the fundamental rights within the EU.
Yes, women and minorities are usually the people, the groups, who are worse hit when something happens, such as the pandemic, such as when there is an economic crisis. Okay, so and we could see this during the pandemic, and therefore we worked with the various groups during the pandemic, and we also came out with certain solutions for problems which were occurring during the pandemic. But that was the exception. I mean, we didn't know that there was going to be a pandemic, so during the pandemic we had to improvise and provide solutions to situations which were emerging and which were affecting directly and hitting worse these groups. But of course then we had our work, our planned work, which are our strategies, our strategy for the rights of persons with disabilities, our gender equality strategy, our first ever LGBTIQ strategy, the Roma inclusion action plan, the anti-racism action plan. So these are all strategies and action plans which we presented and which we continue to work on and work with member states to see that these strategies, that every member state then has its own strategy coming from the European strategy. But apart from that, of course, there's also importantly the legislation which then every member state will have to transpose into its own legislation.
And from your perspective, how big is the gap between a legislation and its efficiency on people's lives?
That's the million-dollar question. Because you have a directive and there's the transposition that already takes some time for the law to be transposed into member state legislation. But then how is it implemented, and how is it affecting people's lives? And I would tell you that legislation is never enough, even if it is implemented to the full, because there's a lot of baggage which we have to address. Culture, stereotypes, attitudes. You know, sometimes there is the law in place, but people still are not in sync with the law. So really, for instance, last year we had a campaign on stereotypes. The subject of the conference today is on stereotypes, which are very difficult to change and which take a long time, and where education plays a very, very important role, of especially education of young children, very young children. I would say, to tell them that racism is not an option, shouldn't be an option, that violence shouldn't be an option, that discrimination should not be an option. But these are things which some people still see as normal in their everyday lives. So in order to change that, and sometimes what happens, we also teach in schools that there should be no discrimination, whether it's racial discrimination, whether it's gender discrimination, whether it's discrimination because of a disability. And we teach these things in most member states and in most schools. But then when they go home, they unlearn what they learned at school, and then they grow up to be adults who would discriminate nonetheless. So really we have a lot of work to do. But legislation, the fact that we are making these laws, the fact that people are talking about these laws, because when a law is being discussed in Parliament, whether it's the European Parliament or whether it is the national parliaments, there's a discussion and people are listening, and there's the media which is covering these discussions. People start to question whether the way they have been living their lives up to now is the fair way to live. But there's a lot of unfairness in life, whether it is towards women and their participation in the labor market, violence against women, violence against LGBTIQ people, discrimination about persons with disabilities, and it is all this unfairness, all these inequalities, all this discrimination that we want to address, but not only with our legislation, as you rightly point out. There are many other things which we have to do in order to change attitudes, in order to really change our societies and make them understand that discrimination and inequality are not a good way to go.
Is that one of the biggest challenges the EU is facing right now, speaking for inequality, changing the people's perspectives and the way they perceive other people around them?
Well, it is challenging because, you have some member states who are very keen on improving and on reaching 100% equality, but not one member state has 100% equality. So we still have a lot to do, but there are others who actually resist the equality and non-discrimination, and also there are member states who are backtracking. So that really hurts me in a way that it's very difficult to work for equality, in the sense to make people accept equality and understand that equality is good socially, is good economically. But once you get there, you can't rest on your laurels, because then it's much easier to backtrack, as we are seeing. It's more difficult to get there. It's less difficult to take a step back. So really we have to be on our toes all the time. We have to work very hard. The work of the Commission should continue after this. There's a change now soon at the end of this year, And I hope and I am sure that the Commission will continue building on the foundation which we have built. I believe that we have built a strong foundation, but also I believe that key to all this is dialogue. Dialogue with the member states, dialogue with civil society, to understand what society needs and to explain to governments that there is no gain from discrimination. There is no gain from inequality, but everything to gain from working for equality, because in that way every person with his and her potential, this potential is not wasted, because when you discriminate you waste that potential because you are excluding. So we need to include. We look at every person, whether black, white, man, woman, straight, gay, whatever, as a human being and as a person who wants to achieve their ambitions, their goals in life. So let's help them do that. And that's a good social argument, but also a good economic argument, because we lose a lot of talent, we lose a lot of potential when we exclude, when we discriminate.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner. It was a pleasure talking to you. I wish you best of luck.
Thank you.